everyone. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Spook Notes podcast, where we get academic about everything that goes bump in the night. I'm Marlena.
And I am Connor.
And on today's episode, we will be talking about...
The Invitation.
Dun dun.
So, The Invitation.
It's a movie.
This movie is a little bit different from what we talked about last week with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, where that movie I feel like is, it's a horror classic. Everybody knows the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This movie is a little bit more, you might not know about it. So
it's a little bit on the modern side, it's a little bit newer.
Yeah, definitely. So, released in 2016, The Invitation is a movie that follows a dinner party where a man starts to believe his ex-wife and her new husband have sinister plans for him and his guests. Basically, we're going to be talking about spoilers for this film, so I didn't say this for Texas Chainsaw Massacre because, again, everyone's seen it, but for this film, if you want to have no spoilers, I would recommend seeing the movie first.
And then listening to our podcast.
You
should do that every time.
Yeah. But basically, this movie is a movie about cults. It's a cult movie. Well, it's not a cult movie. Cult movies are ones where it has, small but really loyal followers. But it's a movie about cults.
Yeah.
I was messing that up when I was Googling stuff. I was like, cult movies. And I was like, no, that's not what I mean. I mean movies about cults.
Jesus.
So, basically, general opinions. It has a 6.7 on IMDb, an 88% critic score on Rotten Tomato, and a 70% audience score, 74% Metacritic. So basically, it's a pretty well-received film. I don't think it's any kind of,
it's an absolute stellar movie.
Perfect film. But,
yeah.
I think overall, it's very well-liked and has received quite favorable praise from critics.
And especially for, a horror movie, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good score,
It was a festival favorite, and like I said, a lot of people liked it when it came out on limited release and home video in 2016. And I remember during that year in 2016, every year when you see the end of the year lists of best horror movies, this film was on a lot of people's lists. This film, a lot of people liked it that year, and like I said, it may not be a classic like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but it's certainly a movie that, when you see it, you're like, that's just a really well-made, really good movie.
A well-executed film.
Which ties into what I want to talk about next, which is just our initial opinions on the movie, what we think about it. Like I said, I think this is just a really good horror movie, and I think it's well-made, well-directed, well-shot, well-acted. The script is very good. I think the best thing that it does is the way it crafts tension and creates a sense of paranoia where you as the audience aren't sure what's really going on. And I also like how it really sticks to, its horror settings and trappings, and it doesn't kind of, shy away from that. And, spoiler alert, it's a movie where you're not sure if the main character is telling the truth or not. You're kind of in this weird thing where you don't know if it's an unreliable narrator thing or if, the people he's with really are crazy. And whereas some movies might kind of...
You can kind of catch on to, where the story's going to go,
And where some movies might kind of be like, oh, this is all just a character piece. It's all about Will, and he is going crazy, and he has to deal with that. It's like, no, he's actually with a bunch of murderous psychopaths.
Yeah.
And then everybody dies.
This is what's happening. This is fine.
And that's what I like about this movie. It's a really great modern horror movie, and one that I think deserves more attention and recognition. Mm-hmm. What do you think, Marlon? What's your opinion on the movie?
Well, overall, I thought it was a really great film. I really, really liked it. It's different from most horror films, being that it's not like, oh, this is a spooky, crazy monster, this is a ghost coming after me. No, this movie is different. This is kind of playing off of real human fears that, are my friends crazy? Am I crazy? Am I gonna get killed? I don't know, right? So I really like that the theme of the movie that it has is the sense of paranoia and uneasiness and uncertainty, And I don't know, I just overall like the movie and the type of atmosphere it creates for the audience. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, just some kind of quick behind the scenes stuff that I thought would be interesting. This film was directed by a lady named Karen Kusama. She's actually directed some other well-known horror stuff, including the 2009 film Jennifer Body with Megan Fox. Uh,
Great movie.
you know, it's not bad. I mean, maybe it's bad, but it's not terrible. And she also directed a segment in the film that just came out last year, XX, called Her Only Living Son. Do you remember which one that was?
Kind of.
So it was the one where there was the mother and her son, and the son is like the son of Satan, and
Yes, I do remember. Oh, that was really good.
yeah.
You guys should seriously check out that the film XX, because it's a film that's all by female directors, which is awesome. Girl power for the win.
It's an anthology horror movie where all the segments are directed by female directors.
Yeah, really cool. So yeah, that's a little bit about her and what she's done.
So some other stuff that I found interesting was that, well, this film was made in 2014. It was originally supposed to be made in 2012, and that version of the film would have had the cast of Luke Wilson, Zachary Quinto, Topher Grace, and Johnny Galecki. I think that would have been a very different film, and many of those people are also comedy actors.
Yeah. And it's kind of hard to see them in a different light, and especially with this movie, like a very sinister, serious type, you know.
Well, plus those actors are so well known that I don't think it would have worked. Like this movie, like there's only really two actors that I actually know of in this film, and that's David. You know, he's from Game of Thrones,
and then character Pruitt.
And Pruitt, he's in a lot of stuff. He was in Zodiac. He was Twisty the Clown in American Horror Story.
Yeah.
So those, but other than that, the rest of the cast is like I've never heard of any of these people.
But I think that's almost better, just because then you don't have that kind of connection with the actor.
Exactly.
And it's better.
That's like I do feel like that's some of the time my main problem. Like when I saw that Mummy movie from last year.
Mummy movie.
You know, there was the Mummy with Tom Cruise.
Oh! Yeah.
When it's like somebody like that, you only think of it as Tom Cruise. You don't think of it as a character.
You think of like, oh, Mission Impossible, okay, yeah.
And like even when you're talking about the movie, you're like, oh, Tom Cruise is doing this instead of the character.
Yeah.
Like when we're going to be talking about this, we're going to be like Will and Eden and David.
Yeah, like I really don't know what most of the actors' names are.
But even though you don't really know the actors, I think they do a really good job.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like because they aren't, well, obviously they're in other things, but because I haven't seen them in other things, it's kind of like a clean slate for me. And then I don't have any, I guess background knowledge of that, and like how they act.
Opinions.
Yeah, so then I can kind of watch the movie how it is, which is good. So, yeah.
Yeah. So another thing I thought I'd touch on is I didn't include this in last week's episode, but it's something I'd like to include from now on, which is film inspirations, because every horror film is inspired by other films. Whether they know it or not, every horror film is inspired by others. Mm-hmm. I mean, every film is inspired by others. And so basically, for this film, I thought it really falled under the subgenre of horror movies about cults, like we said. Some good examples of this would be Rosemary's Baby, The Wicker Man, the original one, not the Nicolas Cage one.
Oh God! Oh Jesus Christ!
Exactly.
That one.
Another more modern one is the one segment in VHS 2, which is all about this Indonesian cult, which is really cool.
Yeah, it's a really good movie.
But especially Rosemary's Baby and The Wicker Man, I think they really have a lot in common with The Invitation, because they all begin with a group of people who are seemingly friendly and normal from the outset, but in the end
are batshit crazy, y'all.
And the relationships always end in violence and not good things for the main.
Not good things.
Not good things for the main characters.
Yeah.
Much like a real cult might be, which leads us transition
jazz hands
into the next bit. Real life inspiration for the movie. So obviously there are many real world cults. some real world cults are quite good and help people. They focus on things like spiritual healing, meditation, personal one wit, not personal oneness. Cults can provide people with a sense of belonging to something in community with fellow people who share their same beliefs. However, obviously, there are also many cults famous for their violence and the terrifying death associated with them. Some of these famous cults include the Branch Davidians and their famous Waco, Texas standoff that left 80 dead. There's the Heaven's Gate cult, which was also another suicide cult that was in the 90s, where I think a few dozen people died.
Mm-hmm.
And the Order of the Solar Temple, which is famous for, whenever people would try to defect from the cult, would kill defecting cult members, and they were from Denmark or something like that, and they also killed a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I remember hearing about something like that. That's pretty scary stuff, if you think of it.
Well, that's the difference between a cult and a normal religion. A cult is like a way of life, and some cults can get pretty violent and nasty in the sense that if you want to leave the cult, or if you're saying I've had enough of this, sometimes they won't let you leave.
That's terrifying. Oh my god. Ugh.
That's why cults are scary.
Cults are scary. Connor, 2018.
However, I think the two best examples of real world cults that are inspirations for this movie, the ones I want to talk to you guys about a little today, are the Manson family and the People's Temple. So, starting with the Manson family, I won't get into too much detail on the background here, but obviously it was a cult started by Charles Manson in California in the 1960s.
Who recently just passed away.
Oh, right, the late Charles Manson.
FYI.
Thank God he's gone.
Yeah, bye.
No bad feelings here. Originally formed as a religious movement, the Manson family also grew out of a shared racism and believed that there would soon be a large-scale war between whites and blacks. Charles Manson referred to this as Helter Skelter, which he got from a Beatles song.
Wow.
Yeah.
Much influence there.
Yeah. Well, again, the Manson family was also bred out of hippie culture.
Yeah.
And just in the same way that this movie, I feel, is very much ingrained in the hipster and new age lifestyles of the modern age.
The far left-winged peoples.
Exactly.
The liberalisms. The liberalists. I don't know.
Through the 60s and into the early 70s, the Manson family was responsible for a number of murders and assaults. Much like the cult from The Invitation, the Manson murders were often carried out by people on specific orders from Manson himself, who would say, go kill these specific people. The murders mostly took place in large upper-class mansions in California, most famously the Sharon Tate murders. By the way, do you know anything about the Sharon Tate murders?
Not really.
So basically, what it is that a few of Charles Manson's followers, a few of the Manson family, broke into the house of Sharon Tate, who at the time was, I don't know if she was dating or she was engaged to Roman Polanski.
Who's that?
The director of Rosemary's Baby.
I did hear about that, actually. Oh my god. What a sick guy.
Yeah. So they would break into these people's houses and terrorize them and kill them. And obviously, that's similar to The Invitation, except that the sides are switched. In The Invitation, it's the murderous cult members who own the house and want to keep the people in, whereas in the Manson family, they were trying to break in.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So while the Manson family cult was terrifying, and many people consider at the time to be like the worst part of hippie culture, there is, to me, one cult that better acts as a metaphor or inspiration for the cult in this movie, and that's the People's Temple. So obviously I think many of you know where this is going, but the People's Temple was a cult started by Jim Jones in 1955. Originally, the People's Temple appealed to progressive individuals since it focused on advocating for civil rights, racial equality, drug rehabilitation, and the leaders even operated homes for the elderly and people with mental health issues.
Which is all good things, but
So
just wait.
that's the interesting part of it for me is just to watch how something that started with such good intentions ended up in such a horrible event.
Well, like power takes control over people, and obviously this guy who started this cult was, power hungry, and he abused his power in all the wrong ways, as we're going to be talking about a little bit
Exactly.
more. Yeah.
So, it's just the classic, yeah, with too much power comes, insanity. And Jim Jones was certainly insane. So, basically what happened was sorry,
Lung cancer.
Jim, uh, his cult grew, and he grew it by, getting people to come and saying he was helping them and helping others. And it grew to the point where actually it had over 900 members, including some children. Basically, Jones was afraid that there was going to be some sort of imminent nuclear disaster. So he read about this place in Guyana, in South America, where there was a facility where they could survive a nuclear attack, him and his cult. So he took all of his cult members, all 900 of them. They moved to the place that they ended up calling Jonestown, and they lived there. And Jim Jones considered it paradise, like, you know,
Nice tropical weather, away from, civilization for the most part.
a place where he was in charge.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, it's in the name of the place. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
So things escalated to the point where Jones would shoot defectors who wanted to leave when he was getting too crazy. And Jones was afraid that the outside world would come in and ruin his paradise. So while he was afraid of that, he told people that, we need to stick it to the man, say, we need to do something that would go down history as the ultimate form of
going against capitalism.
yeah, exactly, like protesting against fascism, capitalism, and like socialism, and not socialism, like society kind of thing. So
because you were saying they were kind of like a communist.
They were based
society.
on communist ideas. Yeah,
exactly.
So he urged them to take revolutionary suicide. So what he did is he poisoned Kool-Aid with cyanide and other drugs, and he urged all 900 of his members, over 900, and himself, and they all drank the Kool-Aid. That's where that saying comes from. And a total of 909 people died in Jonestown, and it was at the time, the single biggest loss of American life in a deliberate act until 9/11.
That's insane. That is absolutely insane if you think about it. That 900 people willingly gave their life because they hardcore believed in this guy's views. Like, wow. I can't even imagine the mindset you'd have to be in. Well, like crazy, that's what you'd have to be to do something like that.
I mean,
who found them? Did you read up on that at all? Like,
there was federal officers that were already going to Jonestown to investigate what was going on.
Yeah.
And you can see pictures of hundreds of bodies lying in tarps and things like that. And
Jesus.
Yep. And speaking of a charismatic leader who tells people to kill mass amounts of people, The Invitation.
The topic we will be talking about today.
Obviously, I think there are clear parallels between the real life People's Temple cult and the cult in The Invitation.
Yeah.
There's a group. They both are a group of people with seemingly good intentions. In The Invitation, they want to, be free from pain and bad feelings, which sounds good. And they both are led by a charismatic leader from an exotic locale. In The Invitation, they keep referring to when we were in Mexico, and he's in Mexico, and stuff like that. And the charismatic leader in both urged for massive loss of human life via a poisoned red beverage. In one case, it was Kool-Aid. The other case, it was wine. And while Jonestown is the inspiration for a lot of horror movies, I think that The Invitation does a really good job of showing the terrifying reality of something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially in like a more modern setting, because it takes place in California, and it takes place, in a everyday type setting. Like they invite friends over for, you know, like a get together, a dinner, and like you really don't think like something like this would happen. Like the type of insanity that a person would have to be to conduct something like this, and it's just like really interesting to ponder, and it's kind of cool because yeah, it's like a modern day cult in a familiar situation, and you wouldn't even know it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
So moving on. This is the point of the podcast where we're going to get into some of the themes and ideas that the movie touches on.
And obviously, there are our own interpretations
Yep.
of the things that are happening in the movie. So, we're no experts on anything. It's just how we interpret certain things in the movie and what certain elements made us think of.
Yeah.
So,
And like I always say, like, not all these things that we're going to be saying are necessarily meant by the filmmaker, but it's something that can still be read into.
Yeah. Like, all films are subjective, and this is, I guess, what we think of it. So the first one that we both really thought of is that the movie The Invitation offers a lot of biblical themes. The first one being Eden herself. If you look at her name, like Eden, well, when I think of it, it refers to the Garden of Eden. And if you look it up in the dictionary, the definition of the word Eden refers to paradise and peace, almost like nirvana. So Eden kind of represents like the Garden of Eden where there's Adam and then there's Eve, and Adam and Eve refers to Eden and David, being that Eden is like Eve where she, is tempted and she gives into sin in the same way that she kind of gives into suicide because it is her temptation. And obviously, well, if you know the story of Adam and Eve, because Eve eats the apple, then, all hell breaks loose and, God comes down and is like, the fuck are you doing? And punishes Adam and Eve and all that jazz. So basically, what I'm trying to say is like, Eden kind of gives into suicide, and her, based on what she did, kind of affects
everybody else.
And in doing so, like for instance, like when she gives into suicide the first time, she definitely affects what's his name? Will. That he's just mentally broken. First off, with his son passing away, and then now he has to deal with his wife like killing herself. So like her actions definitely affect the people in the
house.
In the house, yeah. The second theme, well, revolving around the biblical theme, is David, and definitely revolving around the parable of David and Goliath. And David in the movie, he refers to being under a lot of pressure in his job, and I think he was a record producer. So obviously, I'm no record producer, but I can imagine.
Really?
Wow, I know, right? One day. But yeah, like I can only imagine it's like hella stressful because hella, and that must suck, especially where he lives. He lives in Hollywood, so
yeah,
California, all that jazz. So yeah, I can only imagine he's under a tremendous amount of stress. So that stress is kind of his Goliath in a sense, that it's bigger than him, and how do I even overcome this? It's just so large, like I don't know what to do. So basically when he joins this cult, it's like the story of David and Goliath, where David is defeating Goliath with the stone, right? Like, or the sling?
The sling.
The slingshot?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's his way of defeating his Goliath.
Exactly. So joining the cult is kind of like coming away from all that stress and, being at peace and being okay with yourself. And, like, I assume that he quit his job of being a producer, right?
Yeah.
So he's, like, free from all that, so he conquered his demons.
I mean, you'd assume he quit his job, but he does still have cocaine, even though he said he gave that up, too.
Yeah, I don't know. The guy's a weird guy, going around killing people left and right. The next person we want to talk about is Will, and Will's like story is kind of like it's like a play on with his name, like God willing. And he allows himself to feel what he wants and chooses to confront pain instead of ignoring it. So he wills himself to feel. So
You can tell that he has a lot of willpower, and that comes from a few other things in the movie as well that we'll touch on later. But I do think that his name is important in the sense that he is the one who faces things head on and isn't afraid to confront things. And whereas that's what the members of the cult are. They are afraid to confront their pain and fear and loss.
Mhm.
Whereas he, with his willpower, does do that.
Well, also like with Eden and stuff like that, when she finds out like her son has died, she wants to commit suicide, and Will, he clearly doesn't because he has the willpower to do that. Even though he does say in the film when he's talking to Eden about their son's death that he wanted to die. Like he wanted to die the second he found out his son was dead. But instead of Eden, he didn't act upon it because he had the willpower. Air quotes.
It's something that I once heard about bravery. I'm pretty sure I heard about it from Harry Potter, but I can't remember where. But basically, willpower is similar to bravery in that bravery is not being able. It's not bravery is not being afraid. Bravery is feeling fear, but still choosing to overcome it and do the right thing and take action.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas a person who isn't brave would feel that fear and just stop and not be able to do anything. Yeah. The brave person shoulders on, which is exactly what Will does.
That's really deep. That really hits the heartstrings.
Well, yeah, you would be like that because you're a Gryffindor.
Hey, listen here. I'm a Ravenclaw, and we all know this.
You're a freaking Gryffindor.
Don't talk to me, Hufflepuff.
Anyways,
on to the movie that we are talking about. So another theme that was present in the movie is, like I was saying, relating to a biblical theme, is the Last Supper, and this can obviously be seen in the one scene when they're eating dinner and having wine and are all together, all congregated together, as would the Last Supper.
And it's literally the Last Supper for some of them.
Yeah. Oh,
for most of them.
Jeez, that's pretty dark. Another element that's found within the Last Supper is wine, and it can be seen as the blood of Christ, being that it, like in normal, like, I don't know, Christianness, like the blood of Christ heals, right? The wine is symbolic to heal things, but here in the movie, it's meant to kill them, especially in the supper scene when they're getting their like little dessert wines, and it's meant to kill them. So exactly. It's not really good. It's not good wine.
I mean, it tasted good. I don't know.
I hope it tasted good. Jeez, if that's gonna be the last thing you drink, I hope it's some like 5-star whatever, really expensive shit.
Exactly. So another biblical, or not even biblical, but just religious thing I thought of was how the plot of the movie was structured itself. And that I think it was structured very much like a mass, like you would see in church. So think about it this way. So the movie starts with all of the characters entering the house and being greeted by, David and Eden, just like you would when you're going to mass. The ushers usher you in a seat, you do the little droplets of water on your head stuff.
You can tell that we're very religious.
Exactly. So then obviously the next part is David, stand-in for the priest, delivers his sermon and tells the group about his ideas, and not directly, but I do believe, even though he doesn't say it in the film, indirectly trying to convert them to his way of thinking. Just like a priest talks to his flock. And then after that, there's the supper, breaking of bread and sharing of wine. And both masses, the film and real life ones, ends with a going in peace. In a real mass, you leave and feel better about yourself. And in this mass, David and Eden literally think that they're going to be going in peace and sending everyone off into a permanent peace of death. Another thing that I thought about was the fact that mass is typically a Sunday morning thing. It happens at the same time every week for everybody. Sunday morning, right? This happens in this film. As we see at the very end of the film, with all the other red lanterns that are lit, um, this kind of, this like mass suicide kind of thing is going on in all these other houses as well at the same time. It's like a mass. Everyone, in the mass, you chime your bell, and it starts at a certain time, and in this, everyone lights their red lanterns and takes part in the sharing of wine.
Yeah. Well, I guess it could be applicable to any other religions. Like, one that stands out in my mind is
The Muslim religion?
yeah, Islam.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
We don't know anything. Yeah, so Islam, because they all pray at the same time, so it's very powerful in the sense that you're all, partaking in the celebration of prayer all at the same time. So definitely in the movie, when you see right at the end when they're lighting the lantern, it's like they are literally all doing it, killing themselves at the same time.
And, there's an idea when you hear all these sirens and everything else and the helicopter go by that there's some sort of mass violence going on. And even though we're not really given all the answers, you can fill in the blanks with your imagination.
Well, yeah, because like you can kind of see that areas like from like their neighborhood that they all like committed mass suicide. Like, what if there's other places in California that are doing this and like
or across the world,
and it's just like, holy crap, like these people are like just going like left and right, like, oh my god, like what the hell's going on, right? So I don't know. So another major theme that we thought of was, it's kind of obvious. It's like the theme of building on suspense and paranoia within the movie. So the viewer watches the story unfold, and they have the option to decide whether or not Will was losing it, or if he was actually telling the truth about the others the whole time. So, like, when you're watching the movie, like, you just really can't tell. And, like, when we were watching it the first time, like, was this guy going insane? Like, like, what the hell is going on in this movie? Like, you don't know until, like, the last
and the movie,
couple minutes
and the movie, the movie really plays on that. With one of my favorite parts of the movie, the first time I saw it, was when, because there's this character, Troy, who has been missing, and then David, and then subsequently the audience believes that maybe somebody, one of the cult members, maybe Pruitt, the bald guy, had killed him. And then David eventually comes to a point where David has a freak out and ruins the supper, saying, like, where's Troy? Where is he? What's going on? What did you guys do? And then he just enters the house. Oh, hey guys, I was just running late. And then you're obviously the immediate thought is, well, Will's just going crazy. It's all just been in his head. But then it does flip-flop and we find out that these people actually are trying to kill them.
Yeah.
So
right after, like, they drink the wine. And, like, even before they drink the wine, Will is still unsure whether or not to fully trust these people. And, like, he does smack the wine away from some of the people. But unfortunately, one of them does drink the wine, Gina. And she does die. So from that moment on, you realize, oh my god, Will was onto something.
He was right the whole time.
He was right. He knows what's up. Another major theme in the movie is definitely confronting pain and grief versus ignoring and being passive about any trauma that's occurred. So Will is straightforward when it comes to dealing with the emotions, or dealing with his emotions, either being anger or grief in the movie. And he faces it head on and allows himself to be in tune with his emotions. The flip side to that is his ex-wife, Eden, who chooses to take the easy way out, in both accounts, suicide. So Eden is passive with her emotions and chooses to feel what she wants, and not really acknowledging what is actually happening or even how to respond in, the appropriate way. So, yeah, those are kind of like the two main, characters that are constantly.
They represent the two sides of the coin
Exactly,
of how you
exactly.
can deal with this loss.
Another interesting thing that we found that kind of relates to Eden being a passive character is Eden is kind of, how would you say this? Like a physical, like a metaphor in
The
a way for.
Well, the house is a physical metaphor for
Yes,
Eden.
yes. The house is a physical metaphor for Eden, being that the house is all barred up and is locked from the inside out. And perhaps this pertains to Eden's capacity of sharing how she feels, being that she bottles up her feelings and just feels trapped in general. Um, it's kind of interesting when you think of that because in the house, especially more towards the end of the movie, when all the violence is occurring, perhaps that's how Eden feels inside all the time because she constantly is having these feelings of conflict, either being internal grief and just blaming herself and all that crap, and you know just like all the different violent thoughts that are trapped inside of her mind. However, she chooses not to let them out. She chooses to repress those feelings, much like how you would bar up windows or even lock the door. So,
And going along with kind of the theme of pain and loss and how you deal with it, I think that the message of this movie, what it's trying to say, is that the only right way to deal with pain and loss is by facing it head on, like Will does, and confronting it. And like how Eden does in the end. Like, even though she does die, she dies by her own hand and by her own free will. Free will.
da-da-da!
Whereas I think it's saying that you can't just ignore your pain, you can't bottle up your emotions.
You have to come to terms with what is actually
Exactly.
happening
Or else
and adjust to it.
or else, like you'll end up like David and Pruitt, who were killed, who didn't killed violently too. You know, they just tried to ignore their pain and didn't face it head on, which is, I think, what the movie is trying to say is the wrong way to deal with that kind of situation.
No, exactly.
So two other little things that I would like to touch on were another thing with the house. I think that the house is an example, acts as an example of how far Eden has gone with her emotions and how far she has isolated them and repressed them to the point where she can live in the house where her son died pretty comfortably. Whereas we see with Will, as soon as he enters the house for the very first time, he looks to his left and the first thing he sees is the vision of his dead son. Because as we know, places, memories and feelings are triggered by places that we associate with, which is exactly what Will does. He has many flashbacks in the film to specific places in the house when he's with his son in the bed
or in the backyard,
in the backyard.
with the barbecue and stuff like that.
Whereas Eden doesn't seem to be affected by this, or maybe she is, but not as clearly and obviously as Will is.
Mm-hmm. Because we never actually see or kind of really understand what Eden is truly feeling.
Yeah.
She's a master of disguise.
And then one last thing is with the coyote at the beginning of the film. I think that that's really important because it sets up Will's character as someone who takes charge and leaps into action. He doesn't let the coyote suffer on the side of the road after he's hit it. He takes charge, kills it, and he approaches his problems head on, which is the exact opposite of almost everyone in the cult who, looks away and doesn't want to approach their feelings and their problems. That's why Will is the only one who notices that something's wrong in the house because he's the one who actually takes charge and takes action.
Mm-hmm. Another one thing that I noticed was the use of color in the movie. More specifically, the use of red and green colors, because they are constantly shown, pretty much, I would say, in every scene of the movie. Either one or both of the colors are shown in the movie. So, red and green, they're both opposite colors on the color wheel, and perhaps are representative of the two outlooks on managing pain, whether or not to deal with the pain or to even repress it. So, when you look at the different elements in the movie that are painted red, like, for instance, the color red, what do you think of when you think of something that's red? Or what emotions that are associated with it? For me personally, I would say, anger, being violent, being hostile. I think of the like blood because blood is red. Then the flip side to that is when I think of the color green, I think of balance and healing and calmness and all that good
All this
stuff,
happy stuff.
all the happy stuff, right? So it's kind of interesting to think of because even if you look at the lantern in the movie, what color is it? It's red, right? The wine, what color is it? It's red. Most of the characters, when they experience pain, they're bleeding. That's red. And
Well, I think everybody when they experience pain bleeds.
oh no, I bleed blue, YOLO. Yeah, but like on the flip side to that, like the colors that are green, or the colors that are green, the elements that are green in color. Number one, the one that sticks out in my mind is the color of shirt David is wearing. It's a green shirt. And as I was saying before, the color green kind of represents being calm and kind of being cool and collected and all of the above, right? Which he is in pretty much all of the movie, especially when he's talking about any elements revolving around the cult. Like, he seems totally at peace, right?
Until the end.
Until the end. Which he's, dead and
Yes.
sprayed with blood, which is the color red. Yeah, so another major, well, not super major, but one thing that I noticed was the color white. Number one being Eden wearing the color white. She's the only character in the entire movie that is wearing white, and pretty much all white. So white for me represents, being pure and being holy and being untouched and like angelic and all that crap. So it's like like how would you say this?
Basically, what we were thinking was that if every color in the color wheel represents some emotion, red anger, green peace, often, other like just other things. Like I've heard orange is like envy.
Envy?
No, green is envy. Sorry, orange is like greed. If every color represents an emotion, then white must represent the lack of any emotion, which is exactly what Eden has.
Mm-hmm.
She bottles up her emotions. And then the only time she actually does feel any emotion is at the end when she is stained with red blood.
Yeah.
She allows all her violent thoughts and her conflicting and chaotic emotions free by shooting herself.
Yeah. Very well put.
Exactly.
Some of the fears that the movie kind of touches on, as we mentioned before, it plays on paranoia and, the sense that you don't really know someone and you can't really trust someone fully. It also plays on loss and pain, social fear, obviously murder, the feeling,
the fear of getting murdered,
the fear of, yeah, exactly. The fear of being, claustrophobic,
stuck in the house.
exactly, because you're being all barred and trapped inside, and domestic violence against women for sure is another major fear in this movie. And I thought it was very interesting because the director, she's directed a lot of female focused films, and definitely in this movie it's present that the theme of child loss, and also, yeah, as we mentioned here, the theme of domestic violence against women, and
those are very female
focused.
Even though the main character is a guy, I mean, I think that it's undoubtedly, you can tell that there's a female influence in the film, and like again, every filmmaker, every creative person paints their art with their own experiences,
exactly.
whether they mean to or not, and I think that definitely shows in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Which is really cool,
Exactly. So basically, our final thoughts. I think that through its use of themes and metaphors, the invitation expertly shows how loss and pain can be corrupted and used in a cult-like mentality, and how different people deal with harrowing situations. It's just an excellent movie, an excellent showcase of tension and paranoia
And
and
suspense and all
suspense. Yeah, so check it out.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it before, definitely watch it.
We highly recommend this movie. You can watch it on Netflix, which is good.
Yes.
Yes.
Watch it for free.
Yeah. On that note, feel free to listen to us on any of the following
Platforms.
That's the word. I'm sorry, guys. I'm long day. Yeah. So you can listen to us on iTunes. You can listen to us on SoundCloud and YouTube.
Just search up Spook Notes podcast.
Spook Notes with the little ghost. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, I hope not any concerns. That would be...
Well, maybe some concerns. That's fine.
That'd be concerning.
Oh my gosh.
Feel free to shoot us up an email at spooknotes@gmail.com. And
if you like the podcast, leave us a like, share with your friends,
and follow us would in a cult.
We'll be doing this once every second week, and our next film will be...
I don't know.
I'm joking. We'll figure out what our next film is, but it's gonna be something good.
Yeah. Stay tuned.
Stay tuned, guys.
And don't forget
to cite the Spook Notes. Bye.